Imagine finding out that the love of your life has been living a double life. It would shatter your world in a way you never saw coming. I meticulously designed and positioned signs by the front entrance, dedicating the last few days to perfecting them. It was time to face the real challenge. I climbed the stairs to the master bedroom, swiftly stripped the bed, and maneuvered the mattress off the queen-sized frame. Struggling, I half lifted and half slid it down the stairs, through the hallway, and out the front door onto the lawn. Back inside, I tossed the slats and bedding down the stairs, following them outside to add to the pile next to the mattress. One more trip upstairs, and I dismantled the side rails, quickly carrying them outside. A glance at my watch showed it was 4:22. Time was running short, and I needed to be done by 5. Reassembling the bed outside took until 4:35. Next, I tackled the kitchen table, light enough for me to handle alone. Angling it sideways through the door, I placed it beside the bed in the yard. The final item was the 6-on-8 throw rug in the living room. Rolling it up, I added it to the growing pile in the yard. I erected the signs and proudly checked the time. 4:55, just 10 minutes before my wife's return. Standing in the middle of the street, I admired my work. It was a sight to behold, almost bringing a tear to my eye. Our marriage bed, the kitchen table, and the throw rug, 3 places where my wife and her lover had repeatedly sinned over the past 6 months. The signs, perfectly placed and clear, completed the scene. I approached each piece of furniture and read aloud the large sign in front of it. These items are free for the taking. They are no longer wanted in this house. If you can handle the stench of betrayal and broken vows, help yourself. The sign above the bed detailed my wife's infidelity, specifying her regular trysts with her lover over the past 6 months. Above the kitchen table, another described their activities, often just before she served me dinner. On the throw rug, a sign indicated their preference for that spot. Each sign was adorned with a 17-on-24-inch photo of the cheating couple in the act. Behind the table, a 5th sign revealed the identity of my wife's lover, Brian Davis, her boss at Mitchell, Price, and Allen. Married with 3 kids, he had no idea of his wife's actions, but would soon learn. The time was 4:57, just in time. She would be home any minute. As I turned to observe the gathering crowd of neighbors and the increasing number of stopped cars, some onlookers began calling friends or the police. I casually acknowledged the gathering and retreated into the house, closing the door behind me. Precisely at 5 p.m., my wife's car rounded the corner. Seeing the commotion near our house, she slowed down, her eyes fixed on the spectacle on our lawn. I imagined her staring at the furniture and signs, especially the large photos of her and Brian Davis in their illicit activities, their faces frozen in moments of lust and pleasure. Even with her car window between us and amidst the crowd of 40 or 50 onlookers, I could still hear her desperate cry. No, oh God, no! Finally, her gaze shifted from the signs to the front window of our house, where she spotted me standing. We locked eyes. She looked devastated, her face pale, tears streaming down her cheeks. It was as if she was silently questioning me, mirroring my own bewilderment. I watched her for a moment before turning away, drawing the curtain shut behind me. Now seems like the right moment to explain how my wife, Emily, and I ended up in this heartbreaking situation. My name is David Thompson. I met Emily during our junior year of college, introduced by a mutual friend. From the moment I saw her, I was captivated. Emily wasn't traditionally beautiful, but she had a magnetic charm. Standing with striking blue eyes and shoulder-length blonde hair, she had a petite yet perfectly proportioned figure that enchanted me. From that moment, I was hooked, never doubting my ability to win her heart. Emily and I began dating and quickly became inseparable. Within a month, we shared our first intimate moment, an experience unlike any other. I was consumed by my love for Emily, unable to get enough of her. Though we weren't virgins, our passion for each other was all-consuming. Every moment together was blissful, every touch electric. Our love grew deeper over the years. After graduating, we married and moved into our first home, a condo in Van Nuys. Emily pursued a career in real estate, while I found work in electronic manufacturing. We built a life together that I believed was perfect. For the next 13 years, we lived an idyllic existence, first in our condo and later in our dream home as our finances improved. We welcomed our children, Madison, now 8, and Ethan, now 6, whom we adored beyond measure. Our family was everything to us. So what went wrong? I wish I knew. I wish I had noticed the subtle signs that something was amiss, but I was oblivious, living in a bubble of love and trust. It took an unexpected event, our daughter Madison falling ill at school, to uncover the truth. It was a Thursday when I got a call from the school nurse, just before noon, informing me that Madison was sick. In the middle of a staff meeting, I asked the nurse to contact my wife. Despite attempts to reach her at her office and on her cell, she was unreachable. The nurse ended up calling me instead. Sensing the urgency of picking up my daughter, I apologized to my colleagues and hurried to Madison's school to get her. When I reached home and opened the garage, I was startled to see an unfamiliar car parked in my spot next to my wife's. A lump formed in my throat and my stomach turned. No, it couldn't be. I tried to reassure myself that my beloved wife couldn't possibly be having an affair. But why was there a strange car in the garage with the door closed? Something was definitely wrong, and I needed answers. I couldn't expose Madison to this uncertainty, so I told her to stay in the car for a moment, explaining that the exterminator was spraying for bugs and the fumes might make her feel worse. It was the first time I had ever lied to her. Madison complained about being tired and wanting to go inside, but I promised to check first and come back for her soon. Madison asked what was going on, and I reassured her everything was fine, blaming my discomfort on the smell in the house. I then took Madison to her grandmother's house, promising to pick her up in a few hours. I didn't disclose what I had witnessed, simply asking my mom to watch Madison until I returned from work. As tempted as I was to confront the cheating duo right away, I realized I needed more than just a confrontation. I needed revenge. On my way back to the office, I began plotting ways to ruin my wife and her boss indefinitely. At the electronics firm where I worked, we had multiple divisions. As a senior engineer in the medical equipment division, we shared a complex with the commercial security equipment division. Once at my office, I told my secretary not to disturb me for the rest of the afternoon. Then I called Mark Johnson, a stellar engineer and longtime friend in the security division. Mark agreed to meet me promptly, mentioning he was already on his way to drop off some blueprints for copying. I told my secretary to let Mark into my office as soon as he arrived. True to his word, Mark knocked on my door 20 minutes later. I invited Mark in and closed the door, explaining that I needed his help. Noting that I looked like I had seen a ghost, Mark listened as I recounted the shocking discovery I had made earlier. I told him about catching my wife and her boss in our house, specifically in our bedroom, when I came home to pick up Madison from school. Despite his disbelief, I assured him it was true, detailing how I found them together. Instead of confronting them, I'd quietly taken Madison to my mom's house to keep her out of the situation. Mark expressed his sympathy and asked about my next move. I admitted I was uncertain but emphasized the need for evidence. I intended to gather audio and video recordings of their encounters and sought Mark's assistance in acquiring security cameras and microphones to discreetly place around the house. Mark questioned the likelihood of there being a next time, suggesting it might have been a one-time incident. However, I dismissed this, explaining that my wife and her boss had regular rendezvous over the past 6 months. They had no alternative locations and found the convenience of our empty house during work hours ideal. After discussing for a few more minutes, we got into the details. Mark mentioned having access to a new beta line of wireless miniature cameras and microphones compatible with my laptop or home computer. Additionally, he had a small voice-activated recorder that I could discreetly place under Emily's car seat to capture any conversations she might have while driving. It would only record her side of the conversation, but it was better than nothing. I expressed my gratitude and told him I'd collect everything from his office the following day. Returning home that evening was the hardest thing I'd ever done. I wasn't sure I could face my wife and pretend nothing had happened. I decided the best course of action was to make Emily believe I wasn't feeling well, which wasn't far from the truth. I picked up Madison from my mom's, and when we got home, Emily was in the kitchen preparing dinner. Seeing Madison with me, she grew frantic. I questioned Emily about her whereabouts and why she hadn't informed me about Madison's illness, mentioning the message from the school nurse on the answering machine. Emily explained she must have accidentally turned off her phone while showing houses and had been busy all day. Cynically, I thought she was likely preoccupied with her affair instead of attending to our daughter. Despite this, Emily hugged Madison and apologized before helping her to bed. I acknowledged that despite her flaws, my wife did love our kids, and it seemed I was the obstacle to her happiness. Emily then returned to the kitchen to prepare soup for Madison and finish dinner for the rest of us. Feeling unwell myself, I told Emily I would sleep in the guest room that night, just in case I was contagious. She noted that I looked clammy and pale. Silently, I acknowledged the irony of feeling sick after discovering my wife's affair. Without responding, I headed upstairs, dreading entering the master's suite, but needing my grooming supplies, toothbrush, and work attire for the next day. I forced myself into the room. The scent of lovemaking had dissipated, and the bed was neatly made. She must have changed the sheets. It pained me to look at it. All I could imagine was her boss having sex with her, whispering sweet nothings about belonging to him forever. Anger surged within me, but I suppressed it. I needed to remain composed until I could unleash havoc upon them both, and I would. That much was certain. I gathered my necessities and retreated to the guest bedroom, shutting the door behind me. Stripping down to my underwear, I slipped into bed, my body tense. I wanted to weep, but I stifled the urge. I had a mission to accomplish, and I couldn't allow my emotions to interfere. I lay in the darkness, unable to sleep. After tending to the kids and putting them to bed, my wife came into the room. I pretended to be asleep. She pressed her palm against my forehead, checking for a fever, then quietly left, closing the door behind her. Emily usually handled taking the kids to school, so I got up early, showered, and left the house before she woke up. It probably struck her as odd, but I could easily claim it was to make up for the time I lost the previous day when I wasn't feeling well. Honestly, I didn't care what she thought at this point. I just wanted to be free. Free from what I had believed was a blissful marriage based on loyalty, honesty, and commitment. How painfully wrong I was. Arriving at work before anyone else, I brewed a pot of coffee and started planning my next moves. I needed to cancel our shared credit cards, transfer half of our joint accounts to a new bank account in my name, and change the beneficiaries on my will, life insurance, and 401 to only Madison and Ethan. It seemed so trivial to dismantle 13 years of my life, but I knew it would get harder. I also needed to find a competent divorce attorney to protect myself from Emily's potential claims. In our no-fault divorce state, infidelity wouldn't affect the financial settlement much, but it might help me retain custody of the kids. Emily had shown how little I meant to her, yet she was a devoted mother, and I didn't want to deprive her of the children. I just wanted joint custody to ensure I remained a significant part of their lives. Suppressing thoughts of my shattered life and the humiliation of hearing my wife praise her lover's superiority, I focused on my tasks. Allowing myself to dwell on it now would lead to self-doubt, which I couldn't afford. That reckoning would come later and likely devastate me. With my to-do list complete, I called Mark's office. He assured me everything would be ready by noon and offered to help install and operate the equipment. Trying to focus on clearing paperwork, I saw Emily's call on my cell. Her usually affectionate tone now only fueled my anger. Emily expressed concern about my well-being, mentioning she hadn't been able to check on me before I left. I responded vaguely, saying I needed to clear my head. She suggested something to make me feel better that evening, but inside I felt only resentment and deception. Keeping my response neutral, I said, "We'll see." Emily noted my apparent lack of interest, and I replied that I was just preoccupied. We agreed to meet at home by 6, and she reassured me she'd be in the office all day if I needed her. I phoned Mark, who confirmed everything was ready. We met at the loading dock entrance, loaded all the equipment into his van, and installed it together. By 3:30, we had set up and tested everything. We installed software on my home office PC and configured a secure folder for the recordings. Bugs were placed in the living room, kitchen, guest bedroom, and especially the master suite, where 4 cameras covered almost every angle. We also installed a camera and microphone in the master bathroom, just in case. The system was motion activated, with cameras triggering the microphones. I was ready. That night was exceptionally hard. After dinner and putting the kids to bed, I followed my wife to our bedroom, turning away from her and pretending to sleep. Emily noticed the change in our routine and asked if everything was all right. I expressed insecurities about whether I was enough for her. She reassured me, saying I was more than enough and she couldn't bear losing me, calling me her perfect lover. Despite her reassurance, I remained distant and brushed off her concern, pretending to be exhausted. Later, I heard Emily softly crying. I felt no sympathy for her, but wondered if her tears were from shame or feeling mistreated by me. Rising before her, I seized the chance to place the voice recorder under her car seat. I reviewed the video and audio from the previous night, confirming everything was captured clearly, even in the dim bedroom light. Emily was calm in the morning, mentioning I had said hurtful things the night before. She gave me a quick kiss on the cheek. Then her demeanor shifted to cheerful, likely due to her afternoon plans with her boss. I poured her coffee and informed her I'd be in my office all day. She mentioned showing several homes that afternoon, expressing confidence in a big sale, but assured me she'd pick up Madison and Ethan after school. With a peck on her cheek, I headed toward the garage door. Emily reminded me I'd forgotten to say, "I love you," stressing its importance. I apologized, explaining I had a lot on my mind, and promised not to forget again. Inwardly, I knew I'd only say those words to someone I could trust again. Emily's plans to show homes all afternoon suggested she'd be with her lover. I hoped so. I was tired of the games and wanted this ordeal over. I spent the morning working in my office, but kept glancing at my watch. Finally, at noon, I told my secretary I'd be gone for a few hours and put my plan into motion. I borrowed a company van and parked across from my house, waiting to see what would happen. At nearly 1 p.m., Emily's car arrived. She opened the garage door and parked in her usual spot, entering the house without closing the garage. I figured she was either leaving again or expecting someone. 10 minutes later, the same car from the day I caught them pulled into the garage, taking my place just as he had taken my place in my wife's life. Watching him get out of the car and the garage door closing, I had to give it to them. They had the nerve to meet in my house, in my bed, to carry on their affair. It proved they thought they wouldn't get caught or didn't care. Well, they'd soon find out they were wrong. They were caught, and I'd make sure they both cared. With this final proof of my wife's infidelity, knowing I'd soon have all the visual evidence I needed, my plan was set. Finally, I let the tears fall. For 13 years, I believed my devoted wife would never cheat on me, just as I'd never cheat on her. As the tears streamed down, doubts flooded my mind. Was he a better lover? Maybe better looking? Neither of us were exceptional, so why jeopardize our marriages? I desperately wanted to confront them, but to what end? I'd already caught them once. Would facing her lover make me feel better? Maybe, but it could also land me in jail. They weren't worth it anymore. My primary concern was the impact this would have on my kids and his. By 2:30, they must have finished because the garage door opened and he left. 15 minutes later, my wife followed suit, closing the garage door behind her. Knowing she'd be back with the kids by 3:30, I quickly parked in the garage and headed to my home office. I didn't want to review all the footage, just ensure the evidence was securely stored on my hard drive. After 10 minutes, I'd seen enough. It wasn't an exact repeat of their previous encounter, but it was explicit. They started on the kitchen table where I eat, making jokes about how often they'd wondered if I realized what had happened there. Then they moved to our bedroom, but not before her lover suggested using my daughter's room for a change of scenery. My wife adamantly refused, saying it was off limits to involve the kids' rooms. At least she had some principles, just not when it came to me. In the bedroom, they resumed their activities. I noticed neither of them expressed love, but my wife continually praised her boss as the best lover she'd ever had. I couldn't understand why. Then they moved to the throw rug by the living room fireplace for another round. When they finished, she didn't bother changing the sheets, assuming she would do so when she returned with the kids at 3:30. This gave her plenty of time to air out the room and remove any evidence since I rarely got home before 6. With the evidence securely on my hard drive, I shut down the system and left the house without checking the assumed mess on our marriage bed. I'd seen enough. My heart, hardened against my wife, still felt sick inside, a sickness soon replaced by burning anger and hatred. I may have even smiled, knowing the hell I was about to unleash on them. Back at work, I filled Mark in on everything. Like me, he couldn't comprehend how someone like Emily could do what she had done. Not only had she broken our vows, but she also humiliated me to her lover, always affirming his superiority. These thoughts plunged me into a deep abyss of pain and despair. I knew I had to emerge from this to destroy them both. I needed a good divorce lawyer. Mark suggested contacting the law firm the company used. I spoke to a corporate lawyer who gave me 3 names of divorce lawyers known for protecting husbands' rights. The first one was retiring and not taking new clients, but the second agreed to meet me the next afternoon at 3. With that settled, I resolved to cancel credit cards, change beneficiaries, and transfer funds the next morning. When I returned home that night, Emily was in the kitchen making dinner while the kids did their homework. She wore a yellow sundress and looked stunning. For a moment, I thought my heart would break again. She was smiling and seemed so happy. I assumed it was her usual post-afternoon delight mood. She greeted me and asked about my day, mentioning hers was great due to making a sale. I responded with mild interest, aware of the true reason behind her happiness. I asked if anything else notable happened or if she met any interesting people. She denied it, saying she was focused on work and her family. Despite her reassurances, I couldn't shake the suspicion of her affair. I headed upstairs to change and noticed the sheets had been replaced and the room aired out. Returning to the kitchen, I mentioned the water on the shower floor and asked if she had showered that afternoon. She seemed startled and denied it, suggesting a clogged drain. I speculated about someone sneaking into the house for a rendezvous and showering afterward, which unsettled her. She tried to laugh it off. As dinner went on, conversation was minimal. I surprised Emily by switching seats with her, prompting her to ask why. I explained it as wanting a change of scenery. She seemed puzzled and ate little, mostly moving food around on her plate. During dinner, the kids talked about their day, but Emily and I mostly listened, making occasional comments. After we cleaned up, I returned to my office to work on my project. I reviewed footage from that day and selected stills to turn into photographs, which I downloaded for printing. Next, I carefully crafted wording for the signs I would create with the photos. All that remained was to visit my lawyer to initiate the divorce, get my finances in order, and await the next visit from my wife and her lover. When I finally went to bed, Emily was already asleep, or at least pretending to be. I was sure my actions that evening had given her something to ponder. Not that it mattered. There was nothing she could say or do to change my mind about divorcing her for her infidelity. There was a small comfort in knowing I'd managed to make her somewhat uneasy. Today was Tuesday, and she had mentioned another sale on Thursday. I took that as a signal she and her lover would meet again. That would be the day I brought them down. The next morning, I rose early, showered, and left before Emily woke up. I had a lot to accomplish and needed all the time I could get. My lawyer appointment wasn't until 3, so I had ample time to handle all the financial arrangements. First, I went to HR to change the beneficiaries on my life insurance and 401 from Emily to Madison and Ethan. The woman assisting me gave me some curious looks, but I felt no obligation to explain my actions. Next, I canceled all our joint credit cards and obtained new ones in my name only. Then I headed to the bank to transfer half of the funds from our joint checking and savings accounts to a new bank account under my name. I knew I needed to address our home, but I assumed the courts would allow Emily to stay there with the kids, so I decided to consult my lawyer first. At 1 p.m., I met with my lawyer, who was professional but skeptical. He warned me that in our no-fault state, Emily would likely get custody of Madison and Ethan, and I'd lose the house and half of our assets. Even with evidence of her infidelity, I laid out how I wanted the petition written. He doubted my chances of taking almost everything from her, but I reassured him that I could persuade her to agree to my terms. Although he wasn't thrilled, he complied, promising to have everything ready for Friday morning. I also had him draft papers to file against her boss and his company for deliberately wrecking my marriage. Those documents would also be ready by Friday morning. When I got home that evening, I remained distant toward Emily. I had reached my breaking point and just wanted to end this nightmare and move on. I knew there would be more pain ahead, but I was resolute. After a quiet dinner with minimal conversation, I retreated to my study. I printed the photos of the love affair and crafted the signs without interruption. I also wrote a letter to Brian Davis's wife, enclosing copies of the photos I planned to use on the posters, informing her that I had ample video evidence if she decided to divorce her husband as I was divorcing mine. Shortly after 11, I checked to make sure Emily was asleep, then retrieved the voice recorder from her car. I rewound it and listened. The recording captured one side of a conversation with Brian. Emily expressed gratitude for their time together that afternoon and mentioned missing him. They discussed spending a whole week together and fabricating a story about a real estate convention. Emily mentioned giving me occasional attention to keep me happy, but expressed a desire to be exclusively with Brian. They confirmed plans for Thursday afternoon and ended the call. Surprisingly, her words didn't hurt as much as they had before. Maybe there was hope for me. Little did she realize how soon she would belong solely to him. Knowing I was just one day away from dismantling their lives filled me with satisfaction. Revenge, I realized, held immense power. I swapped the tape for a fresh one and placed the recorder back under her seat, hoping it would capture her anguish the next day. That night, I barely slept. Not because of heartbreak, I had moved past that, but because of the anticipation of what was to come. For the last time, I got out of bed while Emily slept. I stood there looking at the woman who had once been my love, the mother of my children, the woman I had thought I'd spend the rest of my life with. Tears filled my eyes as I realized I had shared my bed with her for the final time. Never again would we share moments of intimacy. Never again would we dream of our future together. That future no longer existed. As I turned away and left, I wondered if she understood the price she was about to pay for betraying me. She likely didn't, but she would soon learn. After showering, I left the house, stopped at a diner for breakfast, and then briefly went to work to inform my secretary of my absence for the day. I called Mark and updated him on the situation. He wished me luck, cautioned me to be careful, and asked me to keep him informed. I made a quick stop at my lawyer's office to ensure everything was in order for serving Emily and Brian Davis the next day. Next, I called Emily to arrange picking up the kids from school. My mother had offered to keep them for the long weekend since they had no school on Friday. I planned to stop by the house around 3:45 to gather some belongings and take the kids to my mom's. Emily was enthusiastic, even suggesting we spend Saturday in bed together. I agreed nonchalantly before ending the call. I had reached a point where her deceit was intolerable. I took my time returning home. By 12:30, I was parked nearby, waiting for events to unfold. My car was mostly hidden from view, but I had a clear line of sight to our driveway. I didn't need to watch the garage door. Emily and her lover were predictable, and I knew their routine. At 12:50, Emily's car pulled into the driveway, followed 5 minutes later by Brian Davis. The trap was set, and I was ready. I should have felt anguish, knowing my wife and her boss were in our marital bed while I waited around the corner. But she had lost her power to hurt me. It was astonishing how calm I felt as I imagined their activities. It was almost like recalling a poorly made adult film, lacking substance, but with a satisfying conclusion. Around 10 minutes to 3, I saw Brian's car back out of the driveway and leave. 10 minutes later, Emily followed. Sweet as she drove off, I saw her applying fresh lipstick. As they drove away, I quickly pulled into my garage and shut the door. With limited time, I rushed to my office to review the footage from their afternoon rendezvous. Everything was captured, including their disparaging comments about my inadequacy in bed compared to him. But this time, their words didn't sting. Ensuring the footage was securely stored on my hard drive, I spent the next 10 minutes carrying the signs with their photos upstairs, positioning them near the front door for easy access. I then packed essentials for Madison and Ethan, like toothbrushes and clothes, into my car. The only remorse I felt was for the pain my actions would cause my children, but I found some solace in knowing that the blame for our family's breakup rested solely on their mother's shoulders. She chose to have a long-term affair, tearing our family apart. At 3:15, I was waiting outside their school when the final bell rang. I told them they'd be spending the weekend with Grandma, which delighted them given her tendency to spoil them. After dropping them off 45 minutes later, I returned home, ready to set my plan into motion. And so we come full circle to where we began. The bed, table, and rug displayed on the lawn adorned with signs, watched by neighbors awaiting Emily's return to face the harsh truth that I knew everything. That night, I expected Emily to call, but I heard nothing. There was a late call from her cell phone, but when I answered, only silence greeted me. An hour after Emily left, the police arrived. Although they understood my situation, they insisted I remove the signs and photographs to avoid disturbing the peace and facing public indecency charges. I complied. The signs had served their purpose. Seen by my wife from her expression before I turned away, I knew her life had started to unravel. That evening, I drowned my sorrows in a significant amount of Maker's Mark and drifted into an alcoholic stupor. Friday morning greeted me with a massive hangover, yet I felt strangely empowered. Despite feeling saddened and alone, I found strength in knowing I had managed to keep my anger in check long enough to exact revenge on my unfaithful wife and her lover. By noon, I glanced out the front window and saw that the rug, kitchen table, and bed were gone, leaving only the mattress and stained sheets behind. I'd deal with those later. The morning was quiet, but by 3 in the afternoon, chaos erupted. I was certain that Brian Davis's wife had received the letter and photographs that morning. My lawyer informed me that both Emily and Brian, along with his partners, had been served at their workplaces. He described how Emily collapsed in tears upon being served, while Brian unleashed threats against me. His partners retreated behind closed doors for 15 minutes before emerging to present Emily with her final check and informing Brian that his partnership was terminated. When he refused to sell his shares, they cited the company's morality clause regarding fraternization with staff members, which allowed them to sever all ties with him and his mistress. Meanwhile, the receptionist at the front desk relayed that Brian's wife was on the phone, urgently requesting to speak with him. She had received the letter and photos I sent, informing him not to return home and notifying him of her intent to file for divorce the following day. Later, I learned from a colleague that after Brian was escorted out of the building, everyone turned their backs on my soon-to-be ex-wife. She stayed on the floor for about 30 minutes, crying uncontrollably. Eventually, she gathered herself and left, but no one knew where she went. The next day, Emily finally called me, sounding desperate. She asked about the children and whether they knew about the situation. I assured her they were safe at my mother's and wouldn't hear the details from me. She thanked me for my discretion and asked if she could retrieve some belongings. I agreed, offering to leave the house for a few hours. She wanted to stay and talk, but I refused, which led to more tears from her. She begged for my understanding, expressing remorse and insisting she never meant to hurt me. I couldn't help but laugh bitterly at her apology. How could she claim innocence after expressing love and desire for her lover, comparing him to me in such demeaning ways? I accused her of betraying me, revealing that I had recordings of her confessions. Despite her protests, I insisted that her words were recorded, and nothing she said could change my feelings. She professed her love for me, claiming she always had and didn't understand why she said those things to Brian. She explained she had done it to boost his ego because he complained about his wife. I pointed out that she had torn me down to build him up and had been intimate with him for 6 months. She maintained that she never meant to hurt me and didn't mean any of it. When I pressed her further, she admitted it felt dirty with Brian, and she thought keeping it separate from our relationship was the right thing to do. She described what we had as loving and clean. I called her sick and expressed disbelief at her twisted logic, admitting my own foolishness for not seeing it sooner. She begged for a chance to make things right, insisting that she loved only me and belonged to me. She pleaded for forgiveness and offered to come to me immediately, begging me not to leave her. I told Emily that I no longer loved her and that she had already left me with her actions. I condemned her behavior with Brian over the past 6 months, stating it proved she didn't love me. I expressed my disgust and eagerly awaited her departure from my life. I rejected any possibility of reconciliation, emphasizing that any future interaction would only be for the sake of our children, whom she had also hurt. I explained that while I wanted to spare our children pain, I had no intention of sparing her from the consequences of her actions. I wanted her to feel the same pain she had caused me and Brian's wife. When she asked why I told Brian's wife about their affair, I retorted that what she and Brian did was unfair to me and our children. I justified informing Brian's wife by highlighting the destruction of my family and the betrayal of our marital vows. Emily insisted she wanted to fight for our marriage and didn't want a divorce. I told her there was nothing left to fight for and that I'd rather die than stay married to her. I accused her of being delusional and out of her mind. She urged me to reconsider, saying that if I agreed to joint custody for our children, I could stay in the house and receive half of our assets. However, she threatened to share the videos of her affair if I didn't agree to her terms. When I doubted her resolve, she insisted she could and would do it out of spite. She pleaded with me to sign the divorce papers, but I remained steadfast in my decision. In the end, she begged me to sign the papers, but I refused, insisting that she should sign them instead. After hanging up on her, Emily signed the divorce papers, and the divorce was finalized in 6 months. She now lives with Madison and Ethan in our former home, while I reside in a nearby condo. Despite the divorce, we stayed in the same school district to minimize disruption for the kids, although they still felt the pain of the breakup. Madison mentioned that their mother acknowledged her mistake, accepting that our marriage couldn't survive it. We reassured the kids that we would always be there for them. As for what Emily told her parents and sister about the breakup, I'm unsure, but they still communicate with me, indicating she likely didn't place all the blame on me. My mother perceived the divorce as something neither Emily nor I could move past. I had the chance to retrieve the audio recorder from Emily's car one last time, capturing a memorable conversation. She called Brian, thanking him for their time together, expressing concern about my suspicions, and suggesting they pause their affair temporarily. Upon arriving home, she discovered the signs and photographs revealing my knowledge of her infidelity, leading to her panic and realization of the consequences. She called Brian in distress, informing him that I knew everything about their affair and broke down into tears. It's been over a year since those difficult times, and I'm slowly beginning to rebuild my life. I still avoid dating and will likely continue to do so for a while. The thought of reliving what I've just endured makes me wary of entering another serious relationship. Madison mentioned that her mom went on one date, but returned home in tears and hasn't dated since. Emily found work as a receptionist in a retirement village and has put her real estate career on hold. I've never found out if she keeps in touch with Brian Davis, and frankly, I don't care. Brian Davis and his wife divorced, and he's been struggling to find employment. Even though I didn't share the videos of their encounters with anyone, Emily knew I wasn't sympathetic towards Brian. It seems many businesses are wary of hiring someone with a reputation for seducing married women and causing marriages to fall apart. Although I blurred Emily's face in the videos, I kept all the audio. I recently heard that Brian's ex-wife is dating a kind police officer, and it appears to be serious. Good for her. Speaking of Brian's former employer, to avoid negative publicity, they offered me a generous settlement to prevent a lawsuit. I accepted. As far as I'm concerned, that chapter is closed. For now, my focus is solely on my children and their future. Perhaps one day, my own future will take precedence as well. And so this chapter of my life closes, leaving behind a whirlwind of emotions and unanswered questions. What would you do if you were in my shoes? How far would you go to seek justice and reclaim your dignity? Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the story, like and subscribe. Email your story to us and become part of our community. For more stories, check out the next video on my channel. Take care.